welcome to the channel. In this video we'll be discussing PointsBet, which is a company that wasn't on my radar at least until the last few months, but after signing a company transforming deal with the US company NBC, which is the #1 sports broadcaster in the world, which saw the stock re-rate dramatically on the day. It's a company that I have been doing a little bit of work on, and they released a quarterly update just yesterday, so I think it's certainly topical given the price moves in recent days and certainly recent months. Here you can see it listed only only last year, middle of the year at $2. Kind of got to this point. Look, it is an online only business, so there's no doubt that that the pandemic itself would have had a big impact on the business. Probably would have seen a big acceleration in new customers, but we've actually seen more than that when they announced the deal with NBC, which effectively saw it jump from $6 to $12. So I think it was 13 even, and I should say the company did, I think, what was an appropriate thing, and they decided to use that strength to raise more capital as part of this deal with NBC, which will mean that they will be the betting partner for NBC and be on all of NBC's websites and products, and have a really prominent exposure. Obviously, that comes with a cost. It's not just free advertising, so they've obviously raised capital to support that. I think it's probably worth just showing a few of the stats for that NBC opportunity. #1 audience in sports, 184 million viewers, 81% reach of the US sports betting market. And I should say as well, for those of you who aren't aware of the landscape in the US, PointsBet is already in Australia, and it has a little bit of a presence. It's not the #1 player, but maybe in time it could be. But in the US, sports betting has only just started to become legalized in certain states. It's likely that that's going to continue, and more states are going to make sports betting available to the population. And so it's almost like this land grab now, and companies such as DraftKings and now PointsBet are, I guess, arming up, trying to get as much of the market as possible, and a partnership with the #1 sports broadcaster is certainly a very good way to do that, while I guess the opportunity is still so great. It's not simply a case of taking customers from from other competitors, but rather getting customers in a new market almost. These are the commercial agreements. As you can see, there's a very large marketing spend of US $393 million over this 5-year partnership. Probably one major concern I have is, what this pandemic is going to have, what sort of impact this pandemic is going to have in the early part of this agreement. There's no doubt that while people crave sports and crave entertainment, there's no doubt that sports have been impacted just like the rest of the world. Just considering the sports in the US, things like the NBA and baseball. Baseball's had its issues with COVID and players catching COVID. The NBA had to effectively replicate a quarantine bubble to complete their season, and it's impacted viewership. So question is, how quickly will viewership bounce back? I expect that in time it will be back to where it was and more, but will this marketing spend in the early days be a little bit lost on a smaller viewership? Possibly, and that's a big risk. To some degree, though, I think part of that is offset by the fact that I'm not looking for this company to make its big customer gains in the early parts. This is a new brand for people in the US, and brand building takes time. So, for example, the quarterly update yesterday showed significant growth in customer numbers in the US, and the stock sold off quite heavily, and I think probably that fell short of expectations. But my view is that, as I just said a second ago, customer number gains in the short term are probably less important, and I would be more concerned if the growth numbers aren't that exciting in 2, 3, 4 years down the track. Anyway, this just shows the opportunity of this this gaming market, which is growing very quickly. And the estimates themselves have just been growing, and part of that, of course, is changing legislation. Obviously the pandemic, I think, has had an impact there as well, but by that is now at maturity expected to be $30 billion a year. And this is the quarterly update. You can see, and this is an update that disappointed and saw the stock drop by 5% yesterday. But in active clients Australia, the jump between end of June and end of September is significant, 35,000, and that has little to do with the NBC relationship. That's, I think, primarily a result of the pandemic and them spending more money on marketing as they've raised money. But this number in the US is pretty significant. They've almost doubled their client base in only 3 months, which, as I said, may have been disappointing given they now have such prominent exposure on NBC, but we'll see. This is the strategy, which I think is exactly right. They shouldn't. This is a company that has such a large opportunity ahead of itself now. The goal is to get 1 million plus US active clients. This is compared to 40,000 right now, and 10% market share, which shows that 1 million clients is only 10% of the market. Shows that this is a big addressable market here, and that certainly there can be more than one big player to succeed. And as I said just a second ago, I don't think this is a company that should be looking at making a profit. In the short term, it needs to spend everything it can on building that client base, building its brand, and that looks to be the goal here. And this is just a nice little example of some of the exposures PointsBet is going to have on NBC's properties. It is very prominent, and as I said, I think people will start to associate PointsBet with betting in the US very, very quickly, and you'd like to think that will translate eventually to big profits for PointsBet. I haven't shown any slides here, but one other part of this arrangement is that NBC has been given a stake in PointsBet and will have options to buy a significant number of shares in the future. So outside of the fact that they're obviously going to be receiving advertising revenue in the short term, there's no doubt that NBC wants this relationship to work as well as possible. My best guess is that if it all does work well, it's going to be more than 5 years, and they'll probably extend that contract. And as a significant shareholder in PointsBet, they want this to flourish as much as possible, and that's I think a good extra reason to be interested in PointsBet, because both parties here really want this to succeed as much as possible, and if things aren't working out well in the short term, they will be working as closely together as possible to see that turn around. Anyway, that's it. So I think I'd just say my summary about PointsBet is I think it's a very high risk but high possible return investment right now. It's trading at a couple of $1 billion market cap, which already prices in a good amount of growth and profits. But I think, given I've shown just how big that market is, if the relationship with NBC succeeds, if that market ends up being as big as what expectations are, and even if they just get 10% of the market, the opportunity is huge, and this could easily be a significantly larger company than a couple of $1 billion. So I would say in the high risk basket, but yeah, definitely a good speculative buy for a long-term view, in my opinion. Thank you for that. And if you like this video, please be sure to click like and subscribe. Add some comments if you can as well, so we can get some feedback. And I'll be back to you with our next video shortly.